Hello and welcome to this year's trial reenactment done by the KACE Grassroots Internship program. This year we will be doing the trial reenactment of the murder of Vincent Chin. Thank you to Albany for the script. Thank you to Jury Group for providing the slides for today's presentation. Here to introduce us is one of our interns.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming out despite the rain outside. I see some familiar faces in the crowd, as well as some unfamiliar faces. It's not often that we are all gathered together, but it's great to see all of you here. My name is Sean Lim, and I'm a rising junior this fall. I'm an intern for the New Jersey branch of the Korean American Civic Empowerment Grassroots Internship. As interns, we have all been working hard this summer to create an active and thriving student community within New Jersey and New York. During the program, we have been doing weekly voter registration drives, learning about our society, and even meeting government officials in Washington, D.C. But today, we will be performing the trial reenactment, Building Our Legacy, the Murder of Vincent Chin. This script was prepared by the Asian American Bar Association of New York, or ABNY. Vincent Chin was a Chinese-American man who was brutally beaten to death in 1982 in Detroit, Michigan, by two white men, Ronald Evans and Michael Nitz. This was during a time of great anti-Asian sentiment in the US due to the great amount of layoffs and economic downturn in the auto industry, which was blamed on the Japanese. Despite the severity of the crime, the defendants received a lenient sentence, with the judge stating, "These aren't the kind of men you send to jail. You fit the punishment to the criminal, not the crime." Chin's case sends a powerful message about racism in working class America and reminds us about the fight that we Asian Americans need to continue to this day. We interns have been researching the case, reading articles, and rehearsing the script at our office over the last couple of weeks to prepare for this evening's trial reenactment. We are very excited to share a story with you, so please get comfortable and enjoy the performance. And make sure to clap after everyone's done. Thank you.
Timeline of events. June 19th, 1982, Vincent Chin is savagely beaten. Chin dies 4 days later. March 16th, 1983, state court sentencing proceeding. Evans and Nitz are each sentenced to 3 years probation, a $3,000 fine, and court costs. March 31st, 1983, American Citizens for Justice, ACJ, is founded. May 17th, 1983, Lisa Chan meets with Choi, Koivu, and Swarovski. June 1983, ACJ meets with the Department of Justice. November 1983, a federal grand jury indicts Evans and Nitz for interfering with Chin's right to use and enjoy a place of public accommodation on account of his race. June 5th, 1984, first federal trial begins, Eastern District of Michigan. June 28th, 1984, the jury finds Evans guilty. September 11th, 1986, Evans's conviction is reversed by the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. On remand, a motion to change venue is granted, and the second federal trial is held in Cincinnati. May 1st, 1987, the Cincinnati jury acquits Evans.
Introduction. This much is certain. On June 19, 1982, just outside Detroit, Vincent Chin, 27 years old, of Chinese ancestry, a working-class American citizen, engaged to be married the following week, went out with his friends for a bachelor's party. At a strip club, they encountered two men, Ronald Evans and his stepson, Michael Nitz. There was an altercation. It continued outside. Sometime later, and a few blocks away, Nitz held Chin down as Evans swung a baseball bat. The bridegroom's head was split open, blood, spinal fluid, and cerebral matter pooled onto the pavement beneath him as he collapsed into a coma. Chin died 4 days later. In state court, Evans and Nitz faced criminal charges. They accepted a plea bargain. At the sentencing, the prosecutors failed to appear. Judge Charles Kaufman imposed on each man 3 years probation, a $3,000 fine, and court costs. Everything else is disputed. There would be 2 federal criminal trials, a protest movement, and more publicity than had ever been devoted to any incident involving an Asian American. Yet the context, the causes, the consequences of the Vincent Chin case all have been the subject of great controversy. Although the Vincent Chin case has ceased to be infamous, For Asian Americans, it has never stopped being iconic.
The Vincent Chin case is very much a part of our legacy as Asian Americans. This morning, we will explore that legacy by reenacting portions of the court proceedings for you, drawing from the transcripts and the court decisions. The words you hear are the actual words with minor editing for language.
The State Court Sentencing. We begin with the sentencing in Wayne County Circuit Court on March 16, 1983. Evans and Nitz were charged with second-degree murder, but the prosecutors offered a plea bargain to manslaughter. Both men accepted, with Evans pleading guilty and Nitz no contest. At sentencing, both men were represented by counsel, as was common at the time because of the high volume of cases and lack of resources in Wayne County. No prosecutor appeared, nor were the victim's family and friends notified. Defense lawyer Bruce Saperstein spoke on behalf of Evans and argued that Chin was the instigator.
Your Honor, for the physical assault by the victim in this case, the victim initiating the physical assault, this crime would have never been committed. Mr. Evans and Mr. Nitz were seated, and the victim walked up and punched Mr. Evans in the mouth. During the scuffle, Mr. Nitz had his head cut open, was bleeding profusely, and in fact required stitches. Either side, Your Honor, could have been the victim in this case. They could have changed places in this particular case. I think Your Honor would agree in looking in the background, and the background of Mr. Evans is impeccable, that Mr. Evans is not a heinous criminal. I don't believe that the rehabilitation is even in order in this case. I'm confident that this would never happen again, and God knows that these gentlemen would like to see this man back, but we can't change what happened here. With respect to punishment, Your Honor, Mr. Evans is being punished every day of his life over this incident. He can't change that. He has to live with this. His work background is excellent, 17 years at Chrysler.
Mr. Evans, do you wish to say something?
Only that I'm deeply sorry about what happened. If there's any way I could change it, I surely would.
I was looking to see if there was any background on the victim. Do you have any background on him? Did the victim have a criminal record?
I don't have any background on him either way, Your Honor.
It's the judgment of this court that each of the defendants be placed on probation for a period of 3 years. In addition, I require that each of you pay $260 a year, costs at the rate of $25 per month. That each of you pay an additional fine in the amount of $3,000 at the rate of $100 per month. I will leave the question of restitution to civil proceedings.
Judge Hoffman did not explain his reasoning for imposing a sentence of probation, but months later, in an interview, he stated that
These weren't the kind of men you sent to jail. You don't make the punishment fit the crime. You make the punishment fit the criminal.
The community reaction. Traditionally, Asian Americans had believed that they should not make waves, and Asian Americans had always been reluctant to discuss race. Asian Americans did not know the language of civil rights, and in the early 1980s, the subject of race was largely black and white. The Asian American community, however, was galvanized by the notion that a Chinese American could be beaten to death because of his race, but his killer sentence only took a privation and a fine. The two men were white auto workers in Detroit, almost out of work, at a time when the U.S. auto industry was under tremendous pressure from Japanese imports. Detroit in 1982 was perhaps the hardest place in America to be Asian American. You were the face of the enemy. Anti-Japanese sentiment was at its highest. At its height, there was taunting, violence, and public displays, including scenes of politicians and union leaders demolishing Japanese imports that Jap crap with sledgehammers.
it was against this setting that Asian Americans found cause to speak up. For the first time, Asian Americans crossed ethnic and socio-economic lines to join together to seek justice for Vincent Chin. Led by, among others, attorney Lisa Chan, journalist Helen Zia, and Vincent's mother, Lily Chin, a number of Asian Americans formed Asian Citizens for Justice. Their efforts to publicize the case were remarkably successful. The extensive publicity was virtually unanimous in its criticism of the sentence, the judge, the prosecutors, and the two defendants. The case was described as an outrage, the product of racism.
The federal prosecution. In June 1983, Lisa Chan, Lily Chin, and others met with the Justice Department in Washington, D.C. to urge the government to bring federal criminal civil rights charges against Evans and Nitz. Because of ACJ's efforts, the Justice Department received thousands of letters and signatures on petitions urging it to prosecute Evans and Nitz. In November 1983, a federal grand jury in Detroit indicted Evans and Nitz for interfering with Chin's right to use and enjoy a place of public accommodation, the Fancy Pants Lounge, on account of his race and conspiracy to do the same. The case was assigned to Judge Anna Diggs Taylor, one of the first African American women to be appointed to any federal court in the country. The case was extensively litigated with numerous pretrial motions, including a motion to dismiss the indictment on the grounds the federal civil rights law in question applied only to blacks and that Orientals, who were considered by many to be white, were not protected. There was also a motion to change venue because of the adverse pretrial publicity. Both motions were denied.
Trial commenced on June 5, 1984. It was undisputed that Evans and Nitz killed Vincent Chin, but there was sharp dispute over the issue of motivation. The government had to prove Evans and Nitz acted because of Chin's race. We turn now to the opening statements from United States versus Ronald Evans and Michael Nitz, the first of the two federal trials. Theodore Merritt from the Justice Department opened for the government, while defense attorney David Lawson spoke for Evans.
May it please the court, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the evidence will show that on June 19, 1982, a brutal crime was committed on the streets in Highland Park. On that night, the defendant, Ronald Evans, helped by his co-defendant, Michael Nitz, repeatedly beat with a baseball bat a Chinese American citizen of the United States by the name of Vincent Chin, and beat him so bad that he died 4 days later from massive head injuries. And the evidence will prove that Vincent Chin died at the hands of these defendants because he was Chinese American, and because he was enjoying the entertainment of a public bar. The evidence will show that this fatal assault was preceded an hour or so earlier by a confrontation at that bar between Vincent Chin and the defendants. The confrontation was caused by Ronald Evans' barrage of obscenities, baiting, and racial insults directed at Vincent Chin. What happened in Highland Park that night was a story of ugly racism which turned violent.
Now, the burden is on the government to prove not only that Ronald Evans and Michael Nitz were responsible for the death of Vincent Chin, but to show that they killed Vincent Chin because of his race, and with the intent to deny his right to use the Fancy Pants Lounge. Now, we do not believe that the evidence will prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Mr. Evans acted because of Vincent Chin's race. We believe the evidence will show that this was not a civil rights case, but a fight between angry and intoxicated men that ended in the death of one of them.
Lawson gave Evans' version of the altercation. He also attacked the government's witnesses and suggested the issue of race was a fabrication.
The witnesses will tell you that Evans was in an outrage, and he began swinging the bat at Vincent Chin. The bat struck Mr. Chin several times, including the head, the neck, and other parts of his body. Mr. Chin fell in the street with a mortal wound to his head, and he died 4 days later. As a result, Ronald Evans was charged with murder. He pleaded guilty in the Wayne County Circuit Court to manslaughter. Then something happened in that court on March 16, 1983, which set off a chain of events which has resulted in this trial today. And that was that Ron Evans got probation for killing Vincent Chin. Naturally, such a sentence in a case such as this upset and enraged Mr. Chin's family and friends, and also members of the community. And you will hear evidence that after the sentence of probation, Mr. Chin's friends and others met and tried to come up with some evidence that would turn this homicide into a federal matter. We expect that the government will try every opportunity to inject some evidence of racial sayings or racial acts into the case. Because of the massive publicity in this case, because of the influence placed on the witnesses, because of the strong beliefs held by some members of the community that there was evidence to support the government's charges, we expect that the testimony of witnesses will be distorted or changed to support the government's charges.
The testimony. One of the most important witnesses was Racine Cowell, one of the dancers at the Fancy Pants line. As one of the jurors revealed in a post-trial interview, Cowell was seen as a neutral witness who had no reason to lie. Her testimony was critical on the issue of motivation.
The prosecution calls Racine Cowell to the stand. Where are you employed, Ms. Cowell?
Fancy Pants.
Now, Ms. Cowell, let me ask you to direct your attention to the night of June 19, 1982. Were you working at the Fancy Pants?
Yes, I was.
And did you see Vincent Chin in the Fancy Pants that night?
That evening, yes.
And what was his mood when you saw him?
He was laughing and joking.
Now, did you dance that night?
Yes, I did.
And did you see Vincent and his friends while you were dancing?
Yes, I did.
How long did you dance anyway?
Approximately 12 minutes.
And how was Vincent acting when you were up on stage?
Happy and laughing.
Now, what did you do after you finished dancing?
I got off the stage and went back to freshen up in the dressing room. Then I came back out to talk to the customers.
And did anything happen while you were out there talking to the customers?
Yes, I came close to a couple of people that was loud talking, like arguing. And I turned around and I seen Vincent and a couple of people arguing.
And do you see the man in the courtroom today you saw arguing with Vincent?
Yes.
Can you point him out if you can?
He has on the blue tie and blue suit and a light blue shirt.
And what did you hear the defendant say?
All I heard him say when I turned around is, "It's because of you little motherfuckers that are out of work."
And after you heard that, what else did you hear?
Vincent came back with a remark like, "I'm not a little motherfucker." And then it was said to him, "Well, I'm not sure if you're a big one or a little one." And by that time, he got mad.
And who said that to Vincent?
That gentleman over there.
Did you hear Vincent making any comments directed at the defendant?
No, other than, "I'm not a little motherfucker."
Did he ever call the defendant anything?
Not that I heard, no.
In what tone of voice was the defendant talking to Vincent?
A loud tone of voice.
And what happened then?
He pushed him on the shoulder, kind of hard, and pushed him. And then they got into the fight, and the younger fellow jumped into it and started helping him.
And who is that?
That's the gentleman that started helping the older man when he started hitting things.
And did you subsequently learn his name?
Yes, Michael Nick.
Cross-examination of Racine Cowell by Lawson. David Lawson cross-examined for Mr. Evans.
Mr. Evans was speaking in a loud tone of voice.
Like an argument, like if I was arguing with someone.
Was he shouting?
Yes, I could hear him over the music.
Now, when he was shouting, what did you hear him shout?
"Because of you little motherfuckers, we were out of work."
And then Vincent responded.
"I am not a little motherfucker."
Okay. Now, when you were making the rounds and talking to customers, is that part of the business also?
Yes.
And were you soliciting customers?
No, I was not.
Were you asking them if they wanted a lap dance?
No.
Vincent was a friend of yours,
A customer, not like a personal friend, no.
but you liked him,
Yes.
and you liked to see him come in.
Yes.
Another important witness was Jimmy Choi. He and two other of Vincent's friends, Gary Koivu and Bob Sorosky, were celebrating with Vincent that night. On direct examination, Choi described the events leading up to the bachelor party, and then testified about the encounter with Evans and Nitz.
The prosecution calls Jimmy Choi to the stand. How loud was the music on the stage?
It was not blasting but it was just the volume was normal.
So you could carry on a conversation with the person next to you?
Yes, Gary.
And what about the people who were across the stage from you? Could you hear what they were saying in the conversation?
No, I didn't pay too much attention at first. And then I heard a few things.
What did you hear and where did that come from?
I was in the bar for about 15-20 minutes. Then I heard someone mention foreign cars from across the stage. I didn't pay too much attention. I just glanced around and resumed talking to Gary.
Did you hear anything else coming from that side of the stage?
Then I heard Vincent saying something first, okay? He was talking across the stage.
And did you hear any other statements from the men again across the stage?
Yes, I heard the word nips coming across our direction, and I recall Vincent saying that we are not Japanese.
So that is what you referred to when you understood them to mean.
I understood it to be a slang for Japanese.
Now, when you looked over and you saw, well, did you see who was making the statements?
Yes.
Do you see him in the courtroom?
Yes.
Can you point him out?
Yes.
May the record reflect that the witness had identified defendant Evans.
Yes.
Now, when you looked over, was he looking over on your side of the table when he said nips?
Yes, across in our direction.
Now, did there come a time when you heard some more words exchanged across the table?
Yes, I heard Vincent say in a loud voice, "Don't call me a motherfucker. I am not a motherfucker."
And then what?
Then I heard the gentleman say, "Big fucker, little fucker, we are all fuckers."
What happened after he made that statement?
Vincent kept on saying, "Don't call me a motherfucker." Then he got mad and said, "Come on, let's get outside."
And what did Vincent do?
He came around the stage and went over to where the two gentlemen were sitting. The man with the gray hair stood, and Vincent punched him.
Then what happened?
Then they started exchanging blows.
Joy continued to describe the scuffling in the bar, and then he moved on to what happened outside.
And what did they do?
They just went to the car, lifted up the hatchback, and pulled out a baseball bat.
Did you see which one got the baseball bat?
That man there.
The man you identified as Mr. Evans?
Yes.
And what did he do when he got the baseball bat?
He started in not a run, something like a trot, holding the baseball bat like this. And Vincent said, "I'm not going to fight you with a baseball bat." Then they kept on coming, so Vincent ran away from them.
And they pursued Vincent?
Yes, they did.
Choi explained that Evans and Vince were unable to catch Chin. They returned and asked the other two members of their group, Gary Choi Vu and Bob Zorowski, "Where is your friend?" Choi testified that when Evans and Vince saw him, they said, "Let's get this little fucker." At that point, Choi ran away as well. He eventually found Vincent, and the two stopped at a parking lot in front of the McDonald's. We continue with Choi's direct testimony.
Then what happened?
Well, we were still sitting, then all of a sudden I heard Vince say, "Scram!" I turned around and I saw the two men behind us, 3 to 5 steps.
And what did you do?
Well, I scrammed. I ran north of McDonald's right off the bat,
And how far did you run?
30 yards, and then I turned back.
What did you see?
I saw Vincent running across, just about getting to the median of the cars. Then the younger man came up and tried to grab him from behind, pull him around. Then they were scuffling and the older man came with the bat.
And what did you see when he approached Vincent with the bat?
He approached. Vincent was still trying to get away from him, and then the older man, he could not run too fast. He kind of hobbled. He took a swing at Vincent's knees.
Then what happened?
At that point on the knees, one swing, upper section on Vincent, and he walked like this.
And then what happened? What did you see Vincent doing?
Well, he was going down slowly like this, and the old man took a swing right at his head.
What did you do?
I don't know. It was like, I couldn't believe it. I was going, I cannot believe it.
And what else did you see?
It seemed like slow motion. Vincent was going down. Then I saw another glow. Then he was kind of in a crawling position like this, and then it was in a frenzy. Like while he was swinging, he was saying something I could not hear. He was mumbling.
How many times did you see him swing the bat?
The first blow, I saw it very vividly.
And where did that blow land?
Right here.
And after that,
One more blow to the head while Vincent was going down. He kept swinging. I didn't know whether it was connecting or not, but I could not believe it.
and what did you do?
Well, I ran back. I just ran towards the direction right to Vincent.
And what did you see when you got there?
All of a sudden, I saw guns, service guns, and then I stopped abruptly and I saw a man holding a gun. He pulled out a badge like that and told the older man to drop his badge.
Now, when you went over to Vincent, was he conscious?
He was still conscious.
Was he saying anything?
Yes, I cradled his head and I said, "Vincent, are you all right?" And he was saying, "Fight, fight, it's not fair,"
Was he speaking Chinese?
in Chinese.
And then what did you do?
I said, "Someone get a bloody ambulance." I didn't see anyone move, so I ran inside McDonald's and I called the ambulance.
Then did you go back outside?
Yes, I ran straight to Vincent.
And was he still conscious?
He was still conscious. And then I said, "Okay, Vincent." I shook his hand. Snap up, snap up, snap up. The ambulance will be right here. I was holding his hand all that time.
Now, did you travel with him in the ambulance?
Yes, I did.
And did you say anything to the defendants before you got in the ambulance?
Yes, I saw them talking to the police officers, saying something like, "I didn't mean to hurt this boy." And then he said, "My son is hurt." I was totally outraged. I said, "If I had a gun, I would shoot you two right here."
And then you got in the ambulance?
Yes.
One of the defense counsel's principal themes on cross-examination was that Troy had been unduly influenced by others. Troy and other witnesses had met as a group before trial with Lisa Chen, the attorney who helped form American Civic Justice. Chan met with the witnesses to prepare them for their testimony. The meetings were recorded and the recordings were transparent. Defense counsel wanted to introduce the recordings to evidence to show that the witnesses excluded the comparable evidence that race was a motivating factor. The government objected to the case seriously. Judge Taylor sustained that objection, although she permitted defense counsel to confront the witness with his own words on the tape, but only his own words. She ruled that Lisa Chen's statements to the witnesses could be introduced only if and only if they were called to the stand. Frank Damon, one of the attorneys, crossed his mind in Troy.
Well, you have been asked a lot of questions by a lot of people before coming to court today.
Yes.
And one of those people was Lisa Chan.
Yes.
Now, you met with several people about what happened at the Fancy Pants Lounge. And that included the meeting with Lisa Chan in April, with the FBI in May, and with Lisa Chan again in May. Do you remember those meetings?
Yes, I do.
And you knew that at each of those meetings that the FBI was investigating a civil rights violation.
Exactly.
And you knew, did you not, that the investigation was not whether those men did what they did?
Objection, Your Honor. Mr. Choi does not know what the point of the investigation was. His question has no foundation.
It goes to the witness's state of mind.
Overruled.
Now, you knew, did you not, that the investigation was whether these men were motivated in doing this act because of their friend's race.
I object again, Your Honor. Mr. Choi does not know what the investigation was, and the investigation did not have any particular aim in its course.
Mr. Choi may answer the question. This is cross-examination.
Did you know that?
I had a big idea.
A vague idea?
Yes.
Sir, you knew that it was significant whether any racial remarks were made inside Fancy Pants. Did you know the significance of that?
I knew the significance, but I did tell the truth.
Choi acknowledged that he did not recall using racial terms when he had spoken earlier to Lisa Chan and the FBI. In trying to explain why not, Choi echoed certain familiar themes. Asian Americans do not make waves, Asians do not complain of discrimination, and Asians do not use race as an excuse.
And can you explain that when you met with Lisa Chan in April, why did you not tell her that you heard the word nip?
Okay, because that was when the prosecution at the state level, ended. I was in Toronto for my internship. I got back and didn't know what happened, and all of a sudden this lady lawyer came to me. I was not prepared, not as much as I wanted it to be. I don't ever want to mention discrimination. And she was going for the criminal portion of the case. She didn't ask me about discrimination. As I thought of it, more things popped up to me.
Since April of 1983, the more you thought about it, the more these remarks have popped up?
It depends. It all depends on what has popped up in my memory. All of a sudden, a few things came back to me.
Well, let me clear this up if I might. When you met with Lisa Chan in April of 1983, you knew that was after these men were sentenced to probation?
I knew that, yes.
Do you remember Lisa Chan asking you, nobody actually heard anything? I mean, actually heard how it started, what started it? And in answering, I would believe that Evans might have made a smart-ass remark. Do you remember telling her that?
Yes.
And I guess that you are telling us today that of April of 1983, you didn't remember that the word nip had been used.
Yes.
Okay, do you remember also that interview in April of 1983, being asked by someone, besides that they say anything like Chinaman and things like that, that type of thing, just a four-letter word, and in telling them, I had not heard that. I don't think they made any racial remarks, nothing. Did you tell Lisa Chan that?
Yes, I did.
Now, when you met with the FBI agent in May, you did not remember yet that the word nip had been used.
No.
Mr. Choi, am I correct that the first time you mentioned the word nip was before the grand jury?
Yes.
At these meetings you had with other witnesses, do you remember with Gary Colview and Bob Sorosky?
Well, we had a meeting. Yes, we did.
And you each talked about what each of you had seen and heard that evening?
Yes, we did.
And do you remember when you asked Gary whether he heard you say anything about we are not Japanese?
I cannot recall. That was a year and a half ago. This is just like 3 conversations. Everyone was talking. We were like, what do you remember? Well, do you remember that? That is the extent of this meeting.
Now, some people didn't remember some things.
Yes, and a few things, okay? Somebody said, okay, well, you did that. And I said, yes, I remember that. Yes, I kind of have an idea now.
Well, was the purpose of this meeting to get the stories together for this case?
No, sir.
Now, did you receive advice from anyone about what part of this story to tell and what parts not to tell?
I didn't receive any advice to that effect. I was advised to tell the truth and the whole truth.
Don't you believe that Vincent got angry and overly reacted?
I don't think he overly reacted.
Didn't you tell Lisa Chan, in your own opinion, he overly reacted? Will you look at page 11 of the transcript?
Let me think. If I did, I made a mistake. He did not overly react. He tried to ignore any racial remarks. We tried...
I'm referring to right here.
Oh, did I say that?
You do recall saying that then.
I read it. Yes.
Now, at the time you said that, you were describing to Lisa Chan in April events, which, to the best of your memory, were completely devoid of racial provocation.
Well, there was a time, okay, for Chinese, we try not to, shall I say, react. Usually we can take a lot of things. There was a time when I just asked, basically, in the bar, how did he grab him? How did he swing the bat? And she was not really looking for racial remarks. If you go there, it was not a very good place to go in the first place. I didn't want to do anything, plus I tried to shun all the racial things away from me. I had a few experiences, mostly when I deal with my classmates at school. But a few times when somebody drives by and just told me chink, I tried to brush it aside.
After the government rested, the defendants put on a brief defense case. Evans chose to testify.
So, what happened when you sat down at the bar?
I sat down, I think I got one sip of the glass of beer, and this black dancer was dancing. I remember comments coming from across the stage directed towards her and telling her what a crummy dancer she was, right?
Did you see who was making those comments?
I really don't know who was making those comments.
You know they were coming from across the stage, however.
Yes.
What did you do then?
I don't like seeing people picked on for a starter.
What did you do?
I made a comment to the effect that, don't worry about those guys, show them what a good dancer is.
Did you direct those comments in anyone in particular?
No, just the dancer.
Did you say anything else?
Not at the time I remember.
When you made those comments, do you recall referring to the people across the stage using the term fucker or motherfucker?
I don't remember distinctly.
Could you have said that?
Sure, I could have.
Do you or have you ever used words like that before?
Many times.
Is that language unusual to you?
No, it isn't.
When you use those words, if you did, was it your intention to insult anyone or provoke anyone?
No.
What happened next?
I remember at this point, the Oriental that was sitting the second from the end saying something to the man on his left, which I couldn't pick up, alright? And he got up.
Okay, at that point, did you notice that he was an Oriental person?
I probably did.
Do you recall the testimony in this court that Vincent Chin stood up and said, "Don't call me a motherfucker"?
Yes.
Do you recall hearing that in the bar that night?
Not distinctly, no.
Do you recall hearing it at all?
No, I don't.
Do you recall testimony in court that you stood up and said, "Big fuckers, little fuckers, we're all fuckers"? Do you remember that testimony?
Yes.
Did you say that?
I don't remember saying it.
Could you have said that?
Yes, I could have.
When you saw the person say something to the other gentleman on the left, what is the next thing that happened after that?
I really didn't pay much attention to him. I was watching the dancer. He proceeded around, and I guess next time I was really aware of him was when I turned around and he was standing directly in front of me.
What happened then?
He punched me.
Up to that point, did you call him, or anyone else for the matter, the word chink?
No.
Do you recall calling anyone a nip?
No.
Do you recall saying anything about being out of work or words to that effect?
No.
Did you say those words?
No.
We moved to Evan's testimony that he and Miss were driving in their car when they saw Vincent and Jimmy Choi outside the McDonald's.
Alright, what happened next?
And as we drove by, Michael seemed sitting out front on the steps of whatever was out there and sitting there laughing. He must have been real funny to me.
How did you feel at this point?
Angry.
Why?
Same reason, I guess. The man had sucker punched me and he was responsible for splitting Mike's head open. I was just angry.
What did you do?
I told Mike to park the car.
When you got out of the car, did you have the bat with you?
That's right.
What did you do then?
I ran around to where they were sitting and I hollered at them.
Then what did you do?
I said, "You sons of bitches."
Then what did you do?
They jumped up and started to run. And I was on top of them and I took a swing, caught Chin in the arm.
You took a swing with the bat.
Yes, sir.
Caught him in the arm?
That's right.
What happened then?
I more or less just stopped because they took off running.
What happened then?
Mike came around and he caught Chin in the middle of the lane of traffic out there.
What did you do then?
When I seen Mike scuffling, it just flashed in my mind. He's gonna get hurt again. And I started towards him and something just snapped. I don't remember from there on what did happen.
Did you hit Mr. Chin?
Not that I remember.
Were you trying to kill Mr. Chin, Mr. Evans?
No.
Do you remember what you were trying to do?
No, I don't.
What is the next thing that you do remember?
I remember looking up and seeing a revolver pointed straight at me and a man saying, "Drop the bat."
Cross-examination of Evans by Merritt. The prosecution cross-examined.
Good afternoon, Mr. Evans. Well, you told us a lot about that night, but now you tell us that you blacked out and you can't tell us much about that meeting. Is that right?
That's true.
Now, let me show you Government Exhibit 14. Is this the bat that you used to kill Mr. Vincent Chin?
I can't tell you that. I don't know.
Could you show us how you were holding the bat when you asked Gary and Bob, "Where is your friend?"
I can't tell you that. I don't know.
Now, when you were in the car saying, "When I catch these Chinese guys, I'm going to bust their heads," you hadn't blacked out yet?
I never said that.
When you found Vincent Chin and said, "There they are," you hadn't blacked out yet?
I never said that.
So only when you caught up with Vincent Chin and started swinging the bat at him, that is when you blacked out? Is that your testimony?
Just prior to it.
You can't remember hitting Vincent Chin in the head so he couldn't run away?
No.
You don't remember hitting him in the arms?
No.
You can't remember hitting him in the chest and shoulder and face?
No, I can't remember.
You can't remember hitting him in the head as he lay there lying on the ground?
No, I can't.
So you can't remember telling the police that you are sorry, but look at what they did to your son. You do remember that, don't you?
Not really.
You had the presence of mind to think of an explanation, didn't you?
I don't remember being asked for an explanation.
Well, Mr. Evans, if you would take the bat back, maybe it would bring something back.
Objection. I think we have had enough of the bat, and I think it is meant to harass the witness.
Ask a question, counselor. That wasn't a question.
Yes, all right. Mr. Evans, have you ever chased a man because of a drunken fight and beat him to death?
No, outside of this time, only Vincent Chin.
And it's because he looked like Vincent Chin. Isn't that right, Mr. Evans?
No, that's not right.
The summations. The lawyer summed up on June 26, 1984, focusing on the issue of motivation.
There really is only one reasonable explanation for Vincent Chin's brutal killing. In the minds of Ronald Evans and Michael Nitz, Vincent Chin was a chink who dared to stand up to them. Vincent Chin and his friends were having a good time, spending a lot of money, and that bothered Ronald Evans. And Ronald Evans began a barrage of racial insults, obscenities directed at Chin's mother. He was talking about foreign cars, and because of you motherfuckers, we in the auto industry are out of work. But ladies and gentlemen, you don't have to decide that Ronald Evans and Michael Nitz acted with any racial intent just on the basis of a few derogatory words. Rather, examine what they did and you'll be convinced why they did it. When they walked into the Fancy Pants Lounge that night, they could have only known two things about Vincent Chin: that he was an Oriental and that he was having a good time. They, of course, had never met him before. They saw an Oriental having a good time and acting flamboyant, spending a lot of money. Now, how do you think Ronald Evans reacted to that? Now, the racial animal inside Ronald Evans had been unleashed, and now his prey was anything Oriental. The brutality and the ferocity of the attacks on Vincent Chin tell you that this was no mere barroom brawl that got out of hand. After Michael Nitz got Mr. Chin in a bear hug, Evans' savage and repeated use of that bat even after Chin lay motionless on the pavement, cannot be reasonably explained by mere anger or revenge. The defendants are wrong in saying that this was nothing more than some Marine fights. This was violence turned loose. This was years of pent-up racial hostilities and rage unleashed. This was a modern-day lynching, but instead of a rope, there was a bat.
Defense counsel argued that the issue of race was a fabrication.
How did this tragic incident become confused with race? Meetings with witnesses began to take place, and into this scenario of intoxicated violence, witnesses began to inject, as Jimmy Choi says, their thoughts and their ideas and images of possible racist motivation. A transformation of facts occurred because people went back to take a second look at what happened to see if they could come up with any evidence to support a second prosecution. Suddenly, when Vincent Chin said that I'm not a motherfucker, it was in response not to simply being called a motherfucker, but instead being called a chink, a nib, to some reference about being out of work and foreign cars. What had never been a racial incident became one, and it became one gradually. That's why we have 3 different allegations by 3 different people surfacing at 3 different times. People worked hard with each other and their attorneys searching the dark recesses of their mind to find something, anything that can make this a racial event. Vincent Chin was the same as Ronald Evans, a human being. He was not a person who only had great virtues and no faults. Vincent Chin got drunk and went to new bars and started a fight and wanted to finish the fight. And Mr. Evans, like Vincent Chin, became full of rage, and Mr. Evans wanted revenge. Vincent Chin wanted to finish the fight. Does this make him a hero or a martyr? None of this happened to Vincent Chin because of his race.
The verdict. On June 28, 1984, the jury returned its verdict.
Will the foreman please rise? Mr. Foreman, do you have a unanimous verdict for each of the counts as to each of the 2 defendants? We have, Your Honor.
Will the clerk please read the verdict?
In the case of the United States of America versus Ronald Evans and Michael Nitz, the verdict form reads as follows. We, the jury, find the defendant Michael Nitz not guilty as to count 1 and not guilty as to count 2. We, the jury, find the defendant Ronald Evans not guilty as to count 1 and guilty as to count 2.
The jury thus found Evans guilty of violating the civil rights of Vincent Chin on account of his race. He was sentenced on September 18, 1984. After hearing from defense counsel, Judge Taylor gave Evans an opportunity to be heard. Then, without elaboration, she tersely announced her sentence.
Mr. Evans, is there anything you would like to say?
Only, Your Honor, that I have expressed my regret and remorse on several occasions. I would just like to reiterate that one more time. I am sorry for what happened. I can't say any more than that at this point. I have no recourse but to depend on the American system of justice and you, Your Honor.
Is that all? It is a judge, Mr. Evans, that you are committed to the custody of the Attorney General for a term of 25 years. It will be recommended that you be committed to an institution where you may receive treatment for your alcohol abuse.
The appeal. Evans appealed to the United States Court of Appeals for the 6th Circuit. Circuit Judge Albert J. Engel issued the court's decision on September 11, 1986. The court addressed several issues, including Evans' argument that the federal civil rights law in question did not extend to Orientals, The court rejected this argument, holding that the statute protected any person because of his race, color, religion, or national origin from intimidation or interference in the enjoyment of public accommodations. Citing Yigwo v. Hopkins, Judge Engel wrote,
Orientals come within the broad constitutional protections of the 14th Amendment, even though the original thrust of the amendment was primarily motivated by concern for the rights of Black persons.
Judge Engel also rejected the argument that Judge Taylor erred in refusing to transfer the case because of the trial publicity.
We have carefully reviewed the extensive record made of the publicity in the case and agreed that it was indeed permissible. The nearly unanimous public judgment that Evans and his stepson should have received jail terms and the harsh criticism of the state trial judge, followed by the federal prosecution of defendants based upon the same incident, were bound to lead to a strong public impression that justice had not been done in the state court, and that it was incumbent upon the federal government to right that wrong by a second prosecution. While it probably would have been advisable for the trial judge to have ordered a change of venue, we conclude that there was not reversible error for the trial judge to proceed to impanel the jury.
Ultimately, however, the Sixth Circuit held that Evans was denied a fair trial. The court concluded that Judge Taylor had erred in allowing a witness to testify about racist remarks about Blacks purportedly made by Evans some 10 years earlier. The court also strongly disapproved of what it described as inflammatory language by the prosecution in summation. The court was most troubled, however, by Judge Taylor's ruling not to allow the defense to introduce the tape recording of the meetings Lisa Chen had with the witnesses.
Evans and co-defendant Nitz sought to introduce into evidence tape recordings of interviews which had been conducted by Liza Chen with these witnesses. The defense purpose was to demonstrate that the witnesses' testimony concerning Evans' racist statements was false, and that it was the result of improper coaching of them by Chen in preparation for the trial. Each time the defendants sought to introduce the tapes, however, the court sustained the government objection on hearsay grounds. The government concedes that these rulings were erroneous. We unanimously conclude that a consideration of the relevant factors mandates reversal. Evans should have been permitted to introduce into evidence the entire contents of the tape. The three witnesses were the most crucial of all witnesses for the government. It is true that the district court permitted the defense to elicit a few of the statements, but it was not within the province of the court's proper discretion to prevent the jury from hearing the tapes themselves and judging for themselves the impact upon the witnesses which the purported conversation had, and measuring that against the statements made in court by the witnesses.
The Court of Appeals was so troubled by what it had heard on the tapes that it included, as an appendix to its decision, excerpts from the meetings of Lisa Chan and Choi Koibu and Swarovski on May 17, 1983. Lisa Chan was only 3 years out of law school at the time, and she was not a litigator. She met with the witnesses as a group, and she recorded the conversations. We reenact portions of the meeting for you now.
The purpose of this meeting tonight is so we can help each other remember exactly what happened, how it happened, when it happened, and all the minor details. I was talking this afternoon with the parking lot attendant, the black guy. According to his version of the facts, it's quite different from what I have so far understood them to be. So, I would be center on what you, the three of you, say they are, and somehow try to fit all the facts around these. We will agree this is the story. This is it. When it's a federal prosecution, we're all going to have to be agreeing on this is what happened. Now, if you don't agree, like you definitely remembered certain things happened, say it's a black car, and you definitely remembered it's a white car, and we kind of, okay. Other than that, let's all have it sorted down. Have it down pat. Is it 5 minutes or is it 10 minutes? Is it more like 8 minutes? Let's all agree. Otherwise, you all look funny on the stand. You supposedly were all there.
Is there any harm in getting too accurate? Because they could say, well, you all rehearsed this. Like, if you're in court and we all have the exact same times.
As long as you're within, you could say 8:10, you could say 8:20. I mean, that doesn't matter.
Right. but as long as they have an example.
Right. But as far as the crucial facts, the crucial ones are not conflicting. I'll give you an example. Like what you people have been telling me and then what the parking lot attendant told me. Totally makes me confused. That is going to be the raising question in the jury's mind. Well, who's telling the truth? Or what actually happened? Maybe nobody's to be believed. Now, I don't mean exactly everybody agreed, okay? Everybody agreed to 6:30 on the dot. Okay. But I mean, you know, you can't say that we stayed at Fancy Pants for 2 hours and then another person say we stayed at Fancy Pants for half an hour. I mean, that's a big discrepancy right there.
Right.
Then Vincent started out of the chair.
Yeah.
He ran over.
Yeah.
So that's, you remember.
That's why I remember just before he got up, he says, "Don't call me a motherfucker." I remember that.
Okay. We all remember our different lines, okay? There's no agreement that's fine. Just remember your lines. Chink, foreign cars, big fucker, little fucker, all fuckers. Don't call me a fucker. We all remember our lines, okay? I'm just guessing. It's just logical. You know, I could be wrong, okay? So he said, I just don't know whether you're a big fucker or a little fucker because he had earlier said big fuckers, little fuckers, we're all fuckers.
Maybe that's how they thought they heard that.
I just don't know whether you're a big one or a little one.
Right.
Yeah, it could be.
Okay.
But after I tapped Vincent and Eben said, "I just don't know if you're a big or little fucker." That's when Vincent said, "I told you I'm not a fucker, friend."
Did anybody hear that?
I didn't hear it, but you know, like he's talking to him, and you know, I might have saw him point out the. No, I can say something like that.
I think I heard him say, "Nobody calls me a motherfucker."
I can say that.
The second federal trial. The record did contain other evidence that race was a motivating factor, evidence that was not tainted, even arguably, by the Lisa Chan meeting. For example, Racine Caldwell, the Fancy Pants dancer, testified that Evans yelled at Vincent, "It's because of you little motherfuckers that we're out of work." Jimmy Perry, a bystander near the Fancy Pants lounge, testified that he was given $20 by Nitz and Evans to help them find 2 Chinese guys so that they could bust their heads. And as the prosecution argued, the brutality and ferocity of the attack was proof that this was not just another barroom brawl, but an attack driven by race and bigotry. The Sixth Circuit reversed the judgment of conviction and remanded the case to Judge Taylor for a new trial. On remand, Evans renewed his motion for a change of venue because of the adverse publicity. This time, Judge Taylor granted the motion. She observed that there had been even more publicity about the case since the first trial.
Most damaging of all, the court's reversal covered. In view of this court was the October 12, 1986, Detroit News Sunday magazine cover story on the victim's mother, Lily Chin. The magazine cover was comprised of full-page color photographs of the still-breathing mother. The lengthy story inside, accompanied by more photographs, told of the tragic deterioration of her life to that of a homeless wanderer since the death of her son. The effect of this major feature alone in the newspaper of largest circulation in Michigan and northern Ohio is extremely prejudicial to the court's ability to secure an impartial jury in this area. Moreover, the leadership of this community, including the president and members of the Detroit City Council, who declared a day of mourning in honor of Vincent Chin and presented a memorial to his mother, who have been quoted by the news media uniformly to the effect that the defendant must be punished. Editorial comments, both broadcast and press, and letters to the editor continue strenuously and unanimously to stress the fact that the defendant has never been punished.
Judge Taylor ordered a transfer of the case to the Southern District of Ohio, this federal court in Cincinnati. Ironically, the Asian American community's success at publicizing the injustice to Vincent Chin was a factor in causing the transfer of the case from Detroit, a city with a black majority and a history of civil rights caught in the economic woes afflicting the automotive industry, to Cincinnati, a city known for its southern sensibilities. Indeed, during jury selection in Cincinnati, only 19 of more than 200 prospective jurors said that they had ever met an Asian American. In addition to the different demographics of the jury pool, the prosecution team faced several new challenges, with members stating its witnesses would have to testify to 5-year-old events. More impeachment material existed in the form of testimony from the first trial. Evidentiary rulings that had gone the government's way the first time had been reversed. And Evans, whose selective memory had not impressed the jury when he testified in Detroit, did not take stand in the second trial. It was no surprise then when on May 1st, 1987, the jury returned a verdict in the Cincinnati courtroom finding Ronald Evans not guilty of violating Vincent Chin's civil rights.
The Cincinnati jury was not convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that Evans' actions were motivated by Vincent Chin's race. Was race a factor? Evans steadfastly denied that he was motivated by Vincent Chin's race, and in post-trial interviews, he continued to deny that he was a racist. Perhaps Evans was not a hardcore racist, but racism is more ambiguous, complex, and subtle. Clearly, the mix of the recession, alcohol, testosterone, and tempers was a lethal combination. Perhaps Evans was not a racist in a conventional symbol sense, but he may very well have been motivated by racial impulses that he was only dimly aware of, if at all. As he put it in trying to explain his actions, something snapped, and the brutality of his actions led to the death of Vincent Chin.
What is the legacy of Vincent Chin? Despite the disappointment of many in the final verdict, the Vincent Chin case had a great impact both on the administration of justice in general and on the Asian American community in particular. The Vincent Chin case sparked a public discourse on the practice of Wayne County prosecutors not to appear for sentence proceedings. The case showed how important it was for prosecutors to participate in sentencings and for victims and their families to be given notice of court proceedings. In the years following the Vincent Chin case, federal and state laws, including in Michigan, were enacted giving victims greater rights. And in the discussions leading to the passage of hate crime laws, the Chin case was often cited. The Vincent Chin case also highlighted the need for reform in sentencing and plea bargaining. Within a month after Judge Kaufman sentenced Evans and Nitz to probation, the Wayne County prosecutor announced a ban on manslaughter plea bargains and murder prosecutions. On the federal level, the Sentencing Reform Act was passed in 1984 in an effort to reduce disparities in sentencing. As for Asian Americans, the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals held that indeed Asian Americans were protected by this country's civil rights laws. The murder of Vincent Chin and its aftermath awakened our civil rights consciousness. Asian Americans came together and became a community, one with a voice. For Asian Americans, the death of a man was the birth of a movement.
Lily Chin, Vincent's mother, was an inspiration to many. Although she barely spoke English, she led a courageous effort to seek justice for her son. She became so disheartened, however, after the final verdict, that in September 1987, she returned to her native village in Guangzhou, China. There she remained until 2001, when illness forced her back to the United States for medical treatment. Lily Chin died on June 9, 2002, at the age of 82, in Farmington Hills, Michigan.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. As we conclude today's trial reenactment, I would like to remind us that this reenactment is to remember Vincent Chin's story and to continue his legacy. Vincent Chin's death in 1982 should be a wake-up call to all of us. The brutal murder of Vincent Chin is a reminder of the deep-rooted racism and injustices that are still prevalent in today's society. It brings our attention to the struggles that we Asian Americans face every day. Vincent Chin's case reminds us that we must stand against racism, prejudice, and unfairness. We must work together to spread his message so that injustices like his case will never happen again. Chin was killed because of hatred and misunderstanding. It impacts us as a community, but his story should turn into development for the better. His murder has inspired the development of a pan-Asian American community organizing in Detroit. Not only that, a whole movement has been created and organizations have been formed. But his story must not end there. Instead, we need to continue his legacy and create even more positive impacts and work to make our society better every day. His last words were, "It's not fair." Everyone deserves fair and serious treatment under the law. Our lives are not worth less. We need to remember that justice should be equal for everyone, no matter the race or background. Vincent Chin's death should push us to create a better and fairer future for all. Thank you.